Great. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. We're just waiting a few moments for everyone to join. Thank you everyone for being here for the Civic Center Next 100 public workshop. We're just going to wait a couple more minutes and then we'll go ahead and get started. All right, it's 5:33, so let's go ahead and get started. Thank you everyone for joining us for the Civic Center Next 100 public workshop number 2. In an effort to be as inclusive as possible for this public workshop, we have a Spanish interpreter here with us this evening. Sylvia, thank you so much for being here today. And if you could please let us know how our Spanish speakers can join the Spanish channel.
Good evening. Hola, para escuchar, sorry, para escuchar esa reunión en español, por favor vaya abajo de la pantalla, en la parte derecha, hay un globo. Pueden hacer clic en el globo y escoger el canal de español. Yo estaré traduciendo simultáneamente todo lo que dicen en español. Muchas gracias. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Sylvia. We'll now hear from Happy Haynes, Executive Director of Denver Parks and Recreation.
Good evening, everyone. Sorry, I was trying to get the right buttons clicked, and let me make sure I did it the right way. Yep. My apologies. You'd think after a year I'd have this Zoom thing down a little better. Welcome to everyone for this Civic Center 100 meeting. My name is Happy Haynes. I'm the Executive Director of Denver Parks and Recreation. Really delighted to welcome all of you to the public meeting tonight. I want to start by thanking the Denver City Council and the Denver American Indian Commission for developing a land acknowledgement and permitting us to use it. And I'd like to start our session tonight with that. Denver Parks and Recreation honors and acknowledges that the land on which we reside is the traditional territory of the Ute, Cheyenne, and Arapaho peoples. We also recognize the 48 contemporary tribal nations that are historically tied to the lands that make up the state of Colorado. We honor elders, past, present, and future, and those who have stewarded this land throughout generations. We also recognize that government, academic, and cultural institutions were founded upon and continue to exact exclusions and erasures of indigenous peoples. May this acknowledgement demonstrate our commitment to working to dismantle ongoing legacies of oppression and inequities and recognize the current and future contributions of indigenous communities in Denver. With the Civic Center Next 100 project, we continue to honor the responsibility to be good stewards of this open space. So we're going to be hearing tonight about the four components of this Civic Center Next 100 project that will be the most significant public improvements to the heart of our city in over 100 years. We have an opportunity through this comprehensive public engagement effort and concept design process to re-energize these four areas within Civic Center Park for the next 100 years. The why. Civic Center is where we come when we have things to say in Denver, to exercise our First Amendment rights. Civic Center Park is where we come because we want to celebrate Denver and what's going on in Denver. And we want to hold events and we want to be together. Civic Center is the place where we want to preserve our history and as Denver's first National Historic Landmark. So it truly is the heart of our city and the heart of our downtown. This project is a once-in-a-generation opportunity for all of us in Denver to re-energize Civic Center Park and allow for new activity, making our city and our downtown shine again with new life and activity. And speaking of new life and activity, we are excited that our recreation centers in Denver are coming back, with more of them reopening this week and in the coming weeks, including outdoor sports and programming and many other activities. Look for some new activities right here in Civic Center Park. There's going to be a link in the chat so that you can learn more about what is available. The goal for today's meeting is to update all of you on the feedback we received during our first public workshop and to share with you the draft concept options that have resulted from that feedback that we gained from you. But most importantly, we want to hear again from you tonight about what you like, what you don't like, what you hope, and what you dream for this important public space for the next 100 years. Thanks so much for being here, sharing your time, sharing your ideas, sharing your concerns. We're looking forward to the discussion tonight. And now I'd like to turn it over to our very great partner in this effort from the Civic Center Conservancy, the Executive Director, Eric Lazari.
Thank you so much, Happy. And welcome again to all of you. And thank you for taking time out of your day to be a part of this process. We all know how important Civic Center is to the people of Denver, how it is important to the state of Colorado, how important it is even to the entire Rocky Mountain West. It is truly our community's most essential public space. And as the park's nonprofit partner, the Civic Center Conservancy is dedicated to keeping this place active and thriving for all. We are super excited to be on this effort with our friends at Denver Park and Recreation and the rest of the departments in the city and county of Denver. And we look forward to hearing your feedback. Just to re-echo and emphasize something Happy said, we are truly embarking on a generational after generational commitment to this space. This space has served our community well for 100 years. This space, in order to make sure it stays essential for the next 100 years, we are going through this effort. These four key areas are going to bring energy to the space. They're going to bring fun to the space. They're going to bring welcome to the space. And we encourage you to be honest and direct with your feedback. Let us know what you think. Tell us what you love. Tell us what we missed the mark on. Tell us all of the things, all of the thoughts you have, so we can, as a collective unit, make this better. Last thing I want to say, and I've said this all through our public engagement this week, is give yourself permission to think future state of Civic Center. We know there are challenges in Civic Center right now. We know there are budget challenges. We know there are operational challenges. We know we are limited by certain things right now. Be sure to dream. be sure to think about future state. Think about the public space you want in the heart of our city. For yourself, just a few years from now, for children, a generation from now, and their children as well. Thank you again for being here. Thank you for being part of our community, and we look forward to hearing your feedback. And with that, I'm going to introduce Michael Bruchard from Denver Parks and Recreation.
Thank you so much, Eric. Echoing the comments, thrilled to be here. This is an amazing project. We're really, really excited to be here with you tonight and continue this journey. We are here to get to work and to continue to hear from you about the future of improvements in Denver Civic Center. As a reminder, the Civic Center Next 100 effort will result in a holistic concept design for the 4 key areas you see now on the screen on this slide within Denver Civic Center, including the Greek Theater, Central Promenade, Central Gathering Feature, and Bannack Street. The 2005 Civic Center Park Master Plan has set a vision for these spaces, and this project will further develop design ideas for these 4 key areas with input from the public that will be implemented in Civic Center over the coming years. We'd now like to take a moment to thank our partners and stakeholders. We'd like to extend thanks to Councilman Hines for participating in this process. Civic Center Park is in his district, Council District 10. Also, we would like to welcome Councilwoman Kendra Black, who represents District 4, who we see is an attendee. So welcome, Councilwoman, and thank you. We'd also like to thank our project partners, the Civic Center Conservancy and the Elevate Denver Bond Program. We'd especially like to thank and recognize the voters who approved the Elevate Denver Bond in 2017, which has made the funding for the Greek Theater project possible. We could not do this without the voter support. At this time, let's take a few moments to introduce the rest of our team before we dive into the content and start hearing from everyone else on the call. So you heard from Happy Haynes already, our executive director. I am Mike Bruchard, the Assistant Director for Design and Construction for Denver Parks and Recreation. Jenna Harris is our Fearless Project Manager and will be emceeing tonight. Jesus Arantia is our Community Engagement Specialist, also with Denver Parks and Recreation. Kelly Turner is our Project Manager from the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure. Eric Lazari, who you've heard from, is the Executive Director of the Civic Center Conservancy. And then our very capable design team, who we are thrilled to have joining us, Nicole Horst and Megan Chiatani with Wenk Associates, and Meredith Winskowski from Livable Cities Studio. With that, I will turn it back over to Jenna to walk you through the agenda for tonight's activities. Jenna.
Great, thanks so much, Mike. So as you've heard, we have an action-packed agenda for tonight. We will first walk you through the number of ways you can provide feedback on this public workshop, which is truly the most important part of why we are here tonight. We will walk you through the vision and principles that have been established for all 4 areas of the Civic Center Next 100 project. We will also walk you through a series of design concepts, the part I'm most excited about, for the Central Gathering Feature, Central Promenade, Greek Theater, Bannack Street. And then last but not least, we will have plenty of time for question and answer, where we'll be able to hear from you all about your questions about the design and about the process. And then finally, we'll walk you through the next steps in the public engagement process. So first, I'm going to quickly do an overview of how you can provide feedback on this webinar. First, wanted to let you know that this webinar is being recorded, so feel free to share afterwards with your friends and family or those who missed the presentation. But please do note that participants are not able to speak and we won't be able to see your camera. You will only be able to see and hear from the panelists tonight. But there are a number of ways you can interact on this webinar. The chat, please feel free to put any and all comments in the chat. We will have a couple of open-ended questions. We'll ask you to respond via chat, and we will read a couple of your responses aloud for each of those questions. The next piece is really the question and answer button at the bottom of your screen. This is really where we'll be spending the majority of the time this evening at the end. So if you have a question, please do put it in the question and answer, not in the chat function. There's also a function where you can upvote questions that you have seen from others that you have the same question. To upvote a question, you'll click the thumbs up like button in order to upvote. The upvoted questions are the ones that I'll be running through at the end of the Q&A session. So please do note those as we move through this evening. And finally, we'll have a series of live polls. We'll be asking a series of multiple choice questions that we'll hope you'll respond to through the polls this evening. So thank you again for being here, and I'll hand it over now to Megan from the design team.
Thanks, Jenna. So as everyone has already said, we are planning for the next 100 years. This is a bold visioning effort. We, as a team, intend to acknowledge the monumental role that Civic Center has played in past and will play in future generations here in Denver. This is a National Historic Landmark, and as such, this process will continue in close collaboration with the Landmark Preservation Commission and align with the past planning efforts. Our primary resources for this are the 2005 master plan imaged on the right and the subsequent 2009 Civic Center design guidelines. As we also have additional plans as seen here that are really helpful resources to understand the progression of the design that you see in the space today. But we also understand we need to look beyond the historic lens of the City Beautiful movement and recognize the Indigenous ancestral history of this space and the diverse communities who built and continue to define this city. One of the most critical relationships that has defined and will continue to form the form of Civic Center Park is the civic and cultural axis intersection, which the civic axis links the city and county building and the state capitol running east to west. The cultural axis historically links the Voorhees Memorial and Greek Theater along the central promenade and has since extended and helped form the cultural complex to the south. We understand we need to adapt to the urban context. Civic Center's neighboring government and cultural buildings can help draw users to the park, but they really largely operate on a Monday through Friday 9 to 5 schedule. And the intention here is to really establish an 18-hour park. Those magnets such as retail, residential neighbors, and others while they're not too far away, just several blocks, we understand we need to be proactive about drawing these users both through design improvements and new programming. There are opportunities to engage with new development and construction around the neighborhood. The evolving Acoma Plaza corridor through the library is something that you'll see incorporated into the Greek Theater vision, and will really be a fantastic bridge to that cultural axis. When you look at these gateways, you understand some have been defined, but may not be always seen as a front door. Others do not yet exist, like those along Bannack Street, which will certainly be further defined as that is transformed into a primarily pedestrian corridor. First and foremost, however, as we look at the future of this space, we understand Civic Center has been and must continue to be Colorado's epicenter for free speech, rallies, and activism. It's been a lectern for some of the world's most important leaders. It's been a site of incredible political demonstrations and rallies, even just within the last year, but really for the last century. And it must continue to serve this critical purpose. Not only is this a vital resource for us here locally, but it's really a national forum for political progress. Civic Center needs to be a place for all voices. This is the site where 19 individuals laid down in the middle of the street in 1978 and demanded transportation equality, the Gang of 19 ultimately sparking the beginnings of the ADA movement. As such, we are pursuing design strategies that ensure not only ADA needs are being met, but also that park users get the same experience, whether they're rolling, they're on crutches, they have a stroller, they have a wagon, whether they are speaking English or another language, or if they are housed or unhoused. Civic Center is currently providing critical services for the unhoused community, such as the newly added shower truck shown here, and needs to continue to be able to provide these critical services, but also needs to be designed in such a way that it's able to adapt to the next great urban challenge that the city might face and can continue to be a place for community members in need. Beyond the political, we need to ensure Civic Center is a place for joy and delight for everybody. Civic Center has long been and really does better than anyone else these great events like Cinco de Mayo, Civic Center Eats, that draw people for wonderful celebrations and festivals and markets. One of the biggest tasks of this project is really going to be integrating that same sense of welcoming and feeling invited and engaged when the park is not being activated or programmed. When we need to think about a family with small kids on a Tuesday morning, a springtime date night, and make sure that the creature comforts necessary, shade, seating, and comfortable lighting are available to make this a welcoming and inviting space. I will quickly go through our vision and principles, not to underplay the importance of them, but I know if anyone's been to our last meetings, you've heard these before, but they are at the foundation of why we're here today and how we're moving forward. So improvements to Civic Center will catalyze new activity and animate the heart of Denver. The transformation of these 4 key areas will fulfill past planning visions and elevate Denver's first National Historic Landmark for the next 100 years with new daily energy, world-class performances, and events. How do we do that? We need to enliven Civic Center as a place for people. As we mentioned, this needs to be a place for everybody every day. We need to elevate Civic Center to form a prominent destination centered around distinct cultural and community anchors. We need to celebrate the historic significance of the Civic Center landmark. And we need to incorporate resilient design to ensure Civic Center is a model for successful urban ecology, sustainability, and long-term vitality for the next 100 years. Finally, we need to unify Civic Center by implementing citywide connectivity visions to link to surrounding cultural, recreational, and civic spaces, reinforcing physical and visual connections to the surrounding district. I'll hand it off to Meredith.
Thanks, Megan. So through all of our outreach efforts to date, our last public meeting and many other stakeholder meetings, we have heard a number of key takeaways that have really guided our work to date and all the concepts that you'll see tonight. These in no particular order. The first one is really making it active every day. And this includes new programs and improvements to bring people to the park every day as a very welcoming destination. We need to honor the historic integrity of the park spaces. And this is not only aligning with the Landmark Preservation Committee requirements, but also that improvements should complement the historic character of the park and surroundings. We need to be thoughtful and represent marginalized voices. We know there's a historic lack of representation and engagement with the Indigenous, BIPOC, and mobility limited community members and their histories, and future spaces need to be designed to feel welcoming and encourage these diverse user groups. We need to encourage social mixing, making the park safe and welcoming for all, and thinking about locating new elements strategically to encourage this social mixing. And as we do that, differentiating the park spaces with unique identities and really thinking about each of these areas having a very distinct identity and purpose. And as we do that, it's important to not forget about the art. This really includes both thinking about permanent art, but also temporary art. The last several things that we heard are defining a vision for water features within these 4 project areas. And we know that water can really draw people in and activate a space, but we also need to think about how we're utilizing water in our climate. We heard that the park needs a solution for public restroom access. And while a permanent restroom is not part of the scope for these 4 project areas, a temporary restroom is being explored now as a part of these 4 project areas, in addition to the existing McNichols restroom, which continues to operate. Denver Parks and Rec is also looking at other permanent restroom areas within the park. And lastly, we need to think about finding a space for food and beverage. This process will continue to explore locations for this, as we know that's a key aspect of activation. And so you'll see some ideas tonight. So tonight we have a series of live polling questions, as Jenna mentioned earlier. And so to warm you guys up, we are going to ask you a question about what you are most looking forward to experiencing in Civic Center this summer. So there's a lot of great activity going on. I'm going to just explain each of these a little bit more in case you're not familiar with them as you're thinking. So Civic Center Eats, I imagine you guys know about this one, the weekly food trucks, serving lunch and dinner. The Black Love Mural Festival is 60 or more works of art by Black artists. Civic Center Moves is the evening yoga classes. Civic Center Live is musical and cultural performance in the historic Greek theater, and that's launching later this summer. Civic Center Comedy, also launching later this summer, are live comedy shows in the Greek theater. Bar Civic is the happy hour beer garden launching in July. And lastly, Civic Center Sparkles, the volunteer cleanup opportunities. So if you guys want to, go ahead.
Yep, I was just going to let people know that it should have popped up. So we'll give you some time to look at those options that Meredith just went over and see what is it, those experiences that you're looking forward to this summer.
Yeah, and if it's something else, please share it in the chat. I see one thing coming in, but yeah, if it's not any of these, we'd love to hear what you're most looking forward to. What brings you to Civic Center this summer?
We've got a comment in the chat for sketching with Institute of Classical Architecture in the park.
So we'll give about another 10 seconds or so for people to put in their answers, and then we'll close the poll and share the results. All right. So you all should be able to see the results where it looks like the Civic Center Live is something that people are looking forward to, and then the traditional Civic Center Eats are things that people are also looking forward to experience this summer.
Yeah, a little bit new and a little bit of what's already in place. So it sounds like people are very excited to get back into the park and to activities with others. Thanks, everyone.
Great. So that was your warm-up question, and you're going to get some questions as we go through these, our 4 projects. So our work is really focused around these 4 project areas that have already been introduced to you. Each one has their own distinct purpose and function as they work to activate and re-energize the park for the next 100 years for everyone, every day. So the central gathering feature will be the first one that I talk about. And this one is really a uniquely Denver destination in the heart of the park that has water, garden spaces, and public art. The central promenade, that's where Civic Center Eats happens, making this an adaptable event and market corridor and keeping its strong pedestrian corridor that connects the Voorhees Memorial and the Greek Theater. The Greek Theater is really in a very important park space today, and this project is an exciting opportunity to think about how that can be transformed into a premier outdoor performance venue. So some really exciting ideas there, thinking about the future. And Bannack Street, as that street has been closed off, it is expanding the park in front of the city and county building and balancing that as an event space and also a place for daily activation. So the first one that I'll talk through is the central gathering feature. And the goal here really is to make this a uniquely Denver destination within Civic Center with water, garden, and public art. As Megan talked about, the 1918 historic Bennett plan had the central gathering feature as part of that design concept. So this is really an opportunity to complete the original vision. Honoring that 1918 was the city beautiful aesthetic and movement, and how we can really think about that design framework that's set up with the park, but with a contemporary expression that moves these ideas into the next 100 years. The master plan talks about incorporating water and gardens here. So that's something that you'll see in all of the concepts that we share. And this is the one that I get excited about, creating a magnetic attraction within the center of the city. How can we really make this a place that you tell your friends to go visit when they come into town, that it's the place that people get their selfies taken, that we really want this to be something unique. Celebrating the historic civic and cultural axes. Megan talked about that. This is the place where those two frameworks of the park intersect in the heart of the park. So how can we really celebrate that? Representing historically marginalized voices. We heard a lot about that through the first public engagement, and how Civic Center really is a place for those voices to be heard, and how we can do that through the intrinsic design of the space as well as through public art. Incorporating joy, delight, and new perspectives, drawing diverse visitors 365 days a year. And really making this flexible. All the events that happen in Civic Center Park with the rallies, the festivals, and the programming, that we need to think about how this space is its own identity, but also works within that larger framework. The master plan from 2005 and 2009 set some high goals for us. So this is a premier public gathering place with a grand water feature and open terraces, respecting the views along the civic and cultural axis. So the views from the city and county building to the state capitol, encouraging three-dimensional features, whether that be through public art, plantings, or water. And then really making sure this is cohesive. So individual features can't be set randomly in this space, but really making sure that they belong. We asked during the first public outreach to share some examples that people had from around the country and around the world. And we heard some really great feedback from everyone that really brought a lot of inspiration to how we started to think about these concepts that we'll share with you. And I won't go through all of these, but you can see the list that it was far and wide. We have some great ideas about artist collaboration and what Denver Parks is planning for that. So I'll let Jenna speak to that.
Great, thanks so much, Nicole. So the central gathering feature is really one of the most exciting parts of this project. It's a huge opportunity for the whole city of Denver to give us their input on what you think this artist collaboration should be. We know that it will combine art, water, lighting, and gardens. And Nicole and the WINK team will share with you 3 concept options that really look at the possibilities for what that could be. But please know that we are looking at continuing this process with a call to artists following the Civic Center Next100 project. So this is really the beginning of an exciting opportunity for all of you to weigh in on. So please do put any comments in the chat. We'd love to hear from you to help us shape the parameters for that call to artists. So thanks again for keeping your minds wide open about what this could be. Oh, Nicole, you're muted.
Thanks, Jenna. Someone has to do it, right? You didn't miss anything. I was just saying that this is the exciting part of presenting the concept. So concept 1 is an interactive plaza. This is really a very flexible space in the heart of the park that has extends kind of the promenade towards the Broadway terrace. It has an interactive water feature that you can see a precedent image on the left, that this might be pop jets or a mirror fountain that can change seasonally or daily throughout the day, that half of it might be on and half of it might be off. When the water is off, it also has this opportunity to have programmable light and sound elements that are portrayed onto that ground plane. There's a circular form around this that creates a seat wall within this shaded seating grove. So kind of this crusher finds edge that you could get your lunch from Civic Center Eats and sit in this shaded plaza with the garden space behind you. And watch the water feature, the light and sound that's happening. And public art in this one, I think, could be a lot of things. It could be on the ground plane. It could be a vertical element that plays with the water. It has a lot of ways that it could be interpreted into a very flexible landscape design. Concept 2 is a circular water feature. So this one starts to get some elevation by raising the circular form up 30 inches. And the water feature is circular. So it goes all the way around and has these cascading steps. So it really creates this nice ring plaza where you can imagine sitting in that area, listening to the water cascade down. It creates a really nice lawn platform at the top of it. So you can kind of be in the center of the water feature in many ways. That it creates this unique gathering feature in the center of the park. Programmable light could also go more in a circular motion in this one. So it plays much different in terms of how you could think of things running in a circular motion through there. Concept 3 really starts to take the vertical element a bit further. So this one is coming from the Broadway terrace where those existing stairs are. It eliminates the stairs and creates an accessible route that rises up above to get you 12 feet above the promenade and looking over the park 360 degrees around in a circle. So it's really this immersive experience that could be a sculptural art element in terms of stories that could be told as you're doing this walk, or the ability to be in the center of the park and really feel that energy of being in the heart of Denver. Because you get what it does is create this form. So you have a sloped lawn and play area within the center. So it's creating more of an intimate space in the heart of the park. You can imagine kids kind of running up and down the lawn area. From a view corridor, the walkway runs that 12 feet up in the air. So you still see the city and county building down below that and up above it, with that floating walkway coming through. And because we have a vertical element in here, it starts to take water vertically as well. So you have a water wall that sits along the outside that kind of welcomes people into this central space. You could sit along those edges where the trees are and have kind of a shaded zone listening to the water cascade down. It could also be an illuminated water curtain that could play with some unique art elements that might be portrayed onto a vertical water curtain, or the illuminated light of that kind of being a glow through the park at night. So all of the concepts have water. They all have the garden elements. I didn't speak to those too much, but you can kind of see that they wrap the edge, or the third one, it really sits in the heart of the space. They all have interactive light and technology, and they could all have public art that could go in different directions depending on what that landscape framework is. The style of water feature is very different in each of them. So concept 1 is really this interactive water feature. Concept 2 is also interactive, but it's circular. So how kids can kind of play around that. And when the water's off, I guess I didn't say that on that one. In option 2, it becomes just this place to sit along in a circular form in the center of the park. And concept 3 has that water wall. So they're different also in terms of their interface with the central promenade, whether it's kind of this extended plaza, or the circular water feature in concept 2 kind of bumps into the promenade a little bit, or 3 where it sits above, which is getting that vertical element in there. And when you think about adaptability for events, I think, concept 1 is very flexible. Concept 2 creates a little bit of its own space, but also could be flexible into a larger event. And concept 3, I think, also start to imagine how that has its own intimate space within it, or if there was an event going on in the park that you could really start to be up above, which would be either a cool place for someone being a performer or being a viewer. So our question here is, of those 3 central gathering feature frameworks that we presented, which would you most like to experience in Civic Center? And really thinking about you know, how that art element might be incorporated into some of these. So concept 1, interactive plaza, concept 2, the circular water feature, and concept 3, the water wall and overlook. And would love, as you think about it, would love to hear more feedback in chat about why you're picking that concept as well, which we might not be able to get to all of that, but I would love to hear what's framing some of your thoughts behind that. How are we doing, Jesus, with responses?
So we're still waiting on some people to be able to respond. Again, I think all 3 concepts are really interesting, and they might be debating a lot of what they would prefer.
I know it is a lot to take in. It is a lot to take in.
And so just to reiterate what Nicole has said is definitely put why you would prefer one concept over the other in the chat. If you're trying to look at it, you should be able to move the poll also away for you to be able to look at the concepts and familiarize yourself again with the different concepts. We'll give about another 10 seconds or so as the votes come in. Again, if you're still debating and not sure where you're at, feel free to put it in the chat.
Yeah, I think it's always hard to pick just one, but if there's things you like about 2 or things you like about 3 or the flexibility of 1, all that feedback is really helpful for us.
Okay, so I will end the poll and share the results for you all to see. And it looks like
the interactive plaza. So I'm guessing that probably has a lot to do with some of the flexibility of that space, but put your thoughts in the chat, and I'll keep moving on to the promenade. So listen along as you're writing in your ideas as well. The central promenade, this is where Civic Center Eats happens. Our goal here is that it's a historic and adaptable event, market, and festival corridor, and a comfortable pedestrian space. So our objectives are that we have infrastructure to really allow for those adaptable uses. As we think about the next 100 years, Civic Center Eats will evolve, we'll have new things that happen, and we want to make sure that we're providing the power, the electrical, all kinds of hookups for that, lighting, etc. Increasing day-to-day comfort, ensuring past events can continue, but that we're including that adaptability for new programs to happen, preserving the historic paving pattern, adapting to current stormwater best management practices. So that's really thinking about resiliency and how we think about capturing rainwater for the landscape, and improving to be more durable for heavy event and vehicular use. So as the paving gets replaced, making sure that we're really being adaptable with that. The guidelines here are pretty clear that it really needs to maintain the view between the Voorhees Memorial and the Greek Theater along that cultural axis, and that we're not placing major features along the promenade. During the first round of public outreach, we asked the question about, if you go to the next slide, Megan, what you would most like to experience along the promenade. And of course, this is good, community events and programs. So what's already happening there, and thinking beyond that for fashion shows, parades, cultural festivals. But we also heard a lot about seasonal shade canopy being something that's important. It's a long walk between the Greek Theater and the Voorhees, and how we can make that space really comfortable and provide some shade. And that's where we focus the 2 concepts that we'll show you tonight on, is thinking about shade in the promenade. So this first one is a seasonal shade and banner kit. It has foundations that would provide a place to put poles up and power sleeving underground that you wouldn't see, but these poles could come up to hang seasonal banners that could change for Cinco de Mayo, for Pride Fest, for all the different Black Lives Matter, all the things that happen along in Civic Center Park, that it really starts to celebrate those. It could also be just an artful shade canopy that parks would own, that they put up in the summer to provide this nice filtered shade through the space. So the shade canopy would be at least 15 feet up in the air, so you could drive underneath it. And these would be very flexible, that you don't have to have all of them out. This, you know, in this view, you're seeing 6, but it could just be 2, or it could just be 1 on each side. The idea is that it's really flexible. They could come down when a big event is happening, or be up for multiple days at a time, or weeks at a time, or months at a time. So concept 2 is this unique shade structure. So the thought is, like, you know, it's summer when the umbrellas come out in Civic Center Park, and that these could be really artistic in terms of the design of the shade structure. So an artist could get involved to think about how these could tell stories of the history of the park, of different voices, of different cultures. It could be something that goes back to 1918 and that City Beautiful movement. They are pretty beefy umbrellas. These aren't like your backyard canvas structures. These would be something that they're 15 feet tall. It would take 1 or 2 people in a box truck to load them out, but they could come down for events if they needed to, or they could stay up. So they could have power integrated into them and light integrated into them. And if you think about the promenade with food trucks kind of sitting in between those. We are really excited about bringing more adaptable systems into the promenade, and how we can think about adaptable lighting and activation 365 days a year. And so in the winter time, when it gets dark at 5 o'clock, this could actually be a place of celebration, that people come to see a festival of light show that really starts to relate to all the lights that happen at the Capitol building and the city and county building, that it starts to draw you into the park. So those are the 2 alternatives here. What you didn't see is the infrastructure upgrades and the paving replacement. So that is going to be the same in either concept. The adaptable lighting and the ability to have those light festivals would happen in each. Both have removable shade, following kind of the guidelines that we have from the master plan, but they are different in terms of that style of shade. So where one is these special event banners and the poles that you could also string lights from those poles in the winter time, or the umbrellas that really celebrate the start of summer. So of those 2, which Central Promenade shade concept would you most like to see in Civic Center? So 1 is the summer banners and event banners, and 2 is the shade structures, that umbrella form. I'm such a bad radio host. I always say that. So.
And so, Nicole, as we have the poll open, we did do a small change for attendees. We have been getting some really great comments from those that are in here, but others may have not been able to see those before. So we had changed it where you're able to send your comments to all attendees. So hopefully, as you see what some of your of your neighbors and other residents are saying about the concepts that they like, you're able to, agree with them or say, this is why I like the concept, and react. So we just changed that in the chat. Hopefully it feels a little more communal, especially for this space, and you're able to see some of those other recommendations that people are providing. So at this point, we, it looks like it's wrapping up. So I'll give about another 15 seconds for people to put in their votes, or just as a reminder, if there's a concept you like more, putting in the chat just to give some more context to your vote. And so sharing the results.
Concept 1, so the seasonal shade and banner kit, 67% and 33% for summer light and shade structures. All right, so the Greek Theater. This is a really exciting project to think about transforming the Greek Theater into a premier outdoor performance venue. And as we think about that, it is really important to us and to the city that it serves as a park function first. So that's our first 2 objectives here, is that it continues to be a regular activator for Civic Center Park with rallies, music, cultural performances, and community events, that it also continues to serve as the venue for First Amendment gatherings, rallies, and other civic activities. But that we also want to think about what more it can be. How can we create an adaptable venue for eclectic performances and community-focused events that really gets to making this, making it something that's easy for a community organization to come in and set up, or at least easier than it is today. Making the theater area comfortable for day-to-day and performance use. Preserving pedestrian and ADA accessibility when events are not in place. And as Megan said, that's not just people in wheelchairs, it's people in strollers, it's people hauling equipment around. It's really making it better for everyone and more accessible. And maintaining the historic integrity of the space. The Greek Theater is, it's wonderful architecture that has been there for many years. The master plan guidance does really give us some flexibility here to allow for modifications that provide universally accessible routes. We can do modifications to enhance its use as a performance venue, and we can allow for protection from sun and providing shade. What we must do also is make sure that we don't attach to the historic structure in any way to degrade it, and continue to have those views preserved to it. So we asked in the first round of public outreach what people would like most to experience in the Greek Theater. And this was pretty exciting that it's a lot of things. It's the local music concerts, the nationally touring performances, but it's also plays, theaters, dances, a movie night, having lunch under shade there, lectures and presentations. So as we start to think about the stage, we really want to make sure that it accommodates most, if not all, things that it could be. Most of you probably know, or if you haven't been out there recently and don't remember, the Greek Theater has a lot of accessibility challenges today. It is primarily inaccessible in terms of ramps. It has a lot of stairs. So what you see here in red is all the locations where there are stairs to go up or come down in order to walk through the theater, through the colonnades, or through where the stage sits. The blue shows where you can access it today. So it's along the outsides. And what we're proposing in all of our alternatives is to bring accessibility through the colonnades. So where those where those stairs come up and come down today, that there would be a ramp on both sides there that creates that symmetry in the space, which is really part of the architecture. There are openings in the front wall that's close to the Great Lawn. So utilizing those openings to create access from the upper terrace to the promenade and to the lower bowl. So in the future, you would be able to stroll through the Greek Theater, through the colonnades towards 14th Avenue, and really starts to welcome people into the Greek Theater. Each of the concepts that we'll show also improve the south Gateway Plaza. So this was something that was recommended in the 2005 master plan to expand the plaza behind the Greek Theater along 14th. And what this does is really starts to create stronger connections towards the Acoma Plaza, towards the cultural resources that are there with the Denver Library and the Art Museum. So both connecting to them and drawing people into Civic Center is really important to us. As we think about it as a premier venue, we need places that we can have support infrastructure and buildings for performers. So this plaza can be a place that we've kind of named it the Performers Plaza, that it can accommodate movable green rooms and restrooms that can sit within this plaza or along the widened walk. We also want to make sure that this is an inviting place. So when there isn't a performance going on, that there's the creature comforts here, that there's seating and shade, and that this plaza really is a welcoming space for all the community type events that also happen at Greek Theater or at the Greek Theater, whether it's for the unhoused or for an information center for people to know what's going on. So we have, I guess, we have two concepts for the stage and we have two concepts for the shade here. So I'll start with the two stage concepts. The first one is an extended stage. So where the historic stairs sit today, this would be a platform stage that sits above that. So it's about 4 feet 8 inches above the bowl of the audience. The stage size is about 35 to 40 performers. So this has the flexibility to handle small dance performances. It's set up for, kind of similar to what you think of a typical pop concert could host here. It can handle most events. It's much larger than what it is today, and it's this flat surface. The seating is in the bowl. So you can get about 1,250 audience members seated in this one. And in both concepts, you get about 1,300 to 1,700 standing audience. This is for this option, because that stage sits up, it provides a good buffer for an audience to a performer, but when you think about how you get from the audience to the stage, this one would be a lift that would have to come out for those events to make that happen, and then would be stored away. Concept 2 is a larger stage, and this one is kind of more of an immersive event. So you see some of the images on the left. This is a distinctive stage in the round. That instead of the audience just being all seated, this one allows the colonnades to be used for seating as well. So you see the people standing in the colonnades on this one. This is really starting to think about this more as a piece of furniture in the park. So this would be permanent, reversible permanent, that it could be taken out if at any point it needed, the historic structure needed to be put back, but the thought is this would come out and stay out there all year, that the stage is usable. From an accessibility standpoint, this one has day-to-day access around it. Because the stage is so much larger, it has enough length to make an accessible ramp that comes around the front side of it and brings you up onto the stage. And those historic stairs are preserved on the backside, because this is sitting further out in the bowl. You can see those stairs are still exposed there, so you could walk up onto it as well as having that accessible route. For shade, either of these shade concepts could work with either of the stage concepts. So even though we're also calling this concept 1, it is not exclusive to have to go with the stage concept 1. This one is a standard truss and event shade system. So it protects the performer from rain events, protects the instruments, protects all the AV and sound equipment. So each one of these shade concepts and has the exact same AV lighting all the infrastructure for events are there and set up. And so you can see on the left an image of what that structure could potentially look like. The concept 2 for shade is a much more architectural canopy. So this sits up high on the top of the Greek Theater, so you can still see the view of the historic structure below. There's an image on the left of one on the National Mall in Washington, D.C. So this is much more of a permanent type shade canopy that could be custom, and it would be custom and year round. So more expensive than option 1. If I know sometimes we get those cost questions, which we're really not diving into yet, but you can see they both, concept 2 provides more shade for the people sitting in the bowl. So if an event was going on in the Promenade or in Civic Center or anywhere really, you could come and sit along those terrace seating there and be in the shade throughout the year. So all of these concepts have the South Gateway and that support space around 14th Avenue. They all have adaptable event infrastructure with the lighting and sound. They are exactly the same in terms of that. So that's not a reason to pick one concept or the other. They have the new accessible routes to the bowl and the upper terrace and the colonnade, but they're different in terms of the stage size. So concept 2 being much larger, that in the round, more immersive event. Concept 1 being that extended stage that really handles most events. And the audience layout, whether it utilizes the colonnades or is just in the bowl. And then the integrated ramp that you're able to get in concept 2, where concept 1 is that temporary lift. And then event shade versus year-round shade. So we're going to separate those out. So we'll ask first about the stage shape and style. So concept 1 is the extended stage that really covers the historic stairs and pushes out into the bowl and creates a much more usable stage space for events. And concept 2 is the stage in the round. So a little bit more unique, maybe not as ideal for some setups because you're doing AV equipment all around, but it creates more of an immersive style experience.
Right. Because we have 2 going on right now, what we will do is give you about another 5 seconds to put in your vote, and then we will move to the next poll. And so those are the results for the theater.
Stage in the round by 82% and 18 for extended stage. So the next one is the shade canopy. So that standard audio-visual truss system on concept 1, or more of an architectural tensile shade structure for concept 2.
Okay, and we'll give about another 10 seconds. It looks like people are really voting on these quickly, so we'll close up. That way we're able to share the results.
So this one is a little bit more split, but 70% for concept 2 for the architectural shade canopy and 30% for the standard truss. So thanks.
And again, even if you weren't able to vote, please put anything you'd like in the chat for us to be able to see.
Great. Well, moving on to the last area, Bannack Street. This space is really kind of a balance between accommodating events like it does today, but also bringing in human scale elements for everyday use and being an extension of Civic Center Park and connecting to the Civic City and County building. And so the objectives for Bannack really are to maintain that central plaza, open plaza area as the primary element of the space, Having a secure perimeter. So what that means is not allowing vehicular access on a daily basis, but making sure that it is accessible for vehicles to come in to set up for events and to access the park for operational and maintenance needs. The space also needs to balance the needs of the event market vendors and daily comfort on the north and the south sides. And then it must still function as a bike and pedestrian corridor. There's a bike facility there today, which needs to remain as that is a key corridor from downtown to areas to the south. So when we asked previously how folks wanted to experience Bannack, there was really this balance between bigger event activities and then kind of the everyday activities. So we saw obviously strong desire for cultural performances and winter holiday activation, but also shady areas, areas for whimsy and play, grabbing a bite to eat. So again, really striking a balance between everyday and space for events is really important in Bannack. And as we think about the planning guidance that we have for Bannack, obviously we have the Civic Center master plan and the design guidelines, which really reinforce and strengthen kind of that civic access within the park, connecting to the city and county building. We obviously have guidance from the outdoor downtown plan and Denver Moves with the bikeway as well. So we have two concepts tonight to show you guys. And this first one, just looking at the kind of connectivity and mobility to start, because those are some of the key drivers of how we organize the space. Both of these concepts actually are envisioned to be curbless streets. So we have a curb in the street today, which limits some functionality on the event side, and making it a curbless street really puts people first, puts people on bikes first, and gives a lot of flexibility to events as well. So we have a 12-foot or 2-foot two-way bike lane on kind of the west side of Bannack near the city and county building, and a 24-foot wide service access or really pedestrian promenade through the middle that sort of operates more like a shared street. You can see how we're providing access in and out of the park. And on the north and the south edges, you can see in the graphic, kind of under the trees a little bit, a secure perimeter, which could be something like bollards, which provides permeability for pedestrians and bikes, but obviously limits the everyday car from coming into this space. As we think about the overall kind of functionality of the space and how it works for people, you can see here the large central open plaza, and I'll talk about events a little bit more in a minute. But this space would really would be designed with high quality paving, and then you'd have these garden rooms on the north and the south sides that kind of flank this space and really provide obviously shady spaces for everyday use. So the south garden rooms would have large planting areas with stormwater collection, integrated seating, a lot of shade through the trees you can see, and art elements located throughout. On the north side, you have planting areas that create edges and establish kind of linear garden rooms with seating in the middle and soft plantings on both sides. You can see we've placed a couple kiosks, which would be movable on either side of that central plaza and kind of the edges of the garden space. These kiosks could be utilized for food and beverage. They could rent out or loan out games for the area. It could be outdoor workspace. So really flexible spaces that would be determined at a later date. But you can also see how the tree canopy in these garden rooms is pretty significant. It starts to extend out to Colfax and 14th. So the park and the tree canopy extends out and helps to provide and to kind of strengthen these gateways at Bannack Street to draw people into the park. We've also thought about how we create kind of resiliency and sustainable practices within these designs as well. And so permeable pavers are intended to be utilized for these garden rooms, as well as stormwater collection planters in those zones to collect and improve our water quality and also obviously provide more water for the plantings in those areas. As we think about how this functions for events. This red box in the middle is about a 60 by 80 foot area. So as we've worked extensively with a lot of events folks, this is a size that works for stage and kind of setup and some storage around it. You can see that this central space accommodates that and a lot more space for people to gather during the events. We've also looked at what it could be set up during festivals when we have vendors in this area. So these blue tents here are the kind of typical 10 by 10 tents, and thought through the setup, worked with the events folks again to understand the needs. And you can see a conceptual layout here about how that could happen for some of these events. As we get into concept 2, one of the key differences in concept 2 is that this central service access and pedestrian promenade is a bit wider. So the last one was about 24 feet wide. This one is wider at 40 feet wide, and therefore kind of makes the garden rooms on the eastern edge quite a bit narrower. The bike lane, still the same size, two-way facility on the western side of Bannack. Another key difference in concept 2 is the central plaza and the fountain within it. So you can see that's in that kind of garden, the band of the garden rooms on the eastern edge of Bannack, right adjacent to the Great Lawn and kind of in that central open space. This really reinforces and kind of activates the space on a daily basis. And you can also see in this central space how we've aligned the planters within Bannack to the City and County Building Plaza 2, and kind of redesigned that plaza, the City and County Building Plaza, so that it feels much more cohesive with Bannack as a whole. So here, the linear garden rooms on the eastern edge, we'd have integrated seatings on the edges, but these planting areas would be very robust with a lot of texture and color because they are a lot narrower here. And you can see there's also far fewer trees in this zone because of the spatial, that it's just a smaller space. We also have a kiosk on this one located near Colfax, which could help with the access control in and out of Bannack for those vehicles that need to enter. The images on the top of the screen now just show some ideas around planting texture and how it could really be a four-season thing. And then stormwater collection, how we could get really robust plantings in these spaces, even with stormwater collection. Again, this concept, understanding how the events in the stage area would work, you can see that we're still accommodating the stage area, even though we have trees and planters that are a little bit closer to this zone, but still plenty of area for circulation and gathering around the stage. And then as we look at the vendor layout or the tents, because we have a much wider and open kind of central zone, we get a double row of tents for most of the length of Bannack here, obviously just kind of opening it up at that the central plaza and kind of fountain area, because that could be utilized on a daily basis. And one thing I actually didn't mention on the previous slide, but you don't need to go back, Megan, was just that water feature would be designed in such a way that it could be drivable because that space would need to be utilized during the events as well. So just one thing to note there. And as we look at these two concept alternatives and kind of understanding the similarities and the differences here, obviously they both have a bike lane in the same location and functions the same way. Both have that service drive and pedestrian space, but the size of that is different between the two. And while they both have trees and gardens on the eastern edge, again, the size of those, the design character, the number of trees is very different between the two options. Concept 2 also has the water feature and improvements to the City and County Building Plaza as well. So of these two concepts presented, we'd love to hear which you would most like to experience in Civic Center. So, the options that you saw pop up on your screen are not only 1 and 2, but you might say, well, I like a little bit of both of them. And if that's the case, we would love to hear what you like about each in the chat, so that as we move forward in this process, there is an opportunity here to take some take some of the favorite elements of both potentially and blend it into a preferred concept.
Great. And so give about another 10 seconds for people to put in their final votes. As always, please share in the chat or any questions in the Q&A. So I will be ending the poll and then sharing the results for you all to be able to see.
Great. So I'm seeing, 63% for concept 1. But 26% saying they like a little bit of both. So I see a few things coming into chat. So yeah, keep them coming, but great feedback. And just one more thing to add to chat, and then I think we'll open it up for Q&A. But you know, of all the things we've talked about tonight, everything that Nicole talked about, and Bannack as well, all the 4 areas, we'd love to hear if there was one thing that really resonated with you, one concept that really jumped out to you as a favorite. It would be great if you would share that in chat. So maybe those can keep coming in, and if you want to flip to the next slide, we'll go to Q&A.
Great, thanks so much, Meredith. And thanks for a great but very long presentation. So we want to make sure that you all have a chance to ask your questions. I'm going to go ahead and just start with what we already have in the question and answer box, but please continue to add them and I will get to as many as I can this evening. And the ones that we are not able to get to, we will be following up with a written Q&A response following the workshop. So first we have a question from Alan. This question is about the water features at the central gathering feature. This question is asking whether or not we've looked at the works of Lawrence Halprin in Portland, Oregon, especially the forecourt and Lovejoy fountains as inspiration for this project. So I'll pass that to Nicole.
I know those projects well, so I think that that's great feedback. I don't know if we've studied them in terms of how they fit in here, but I could see them, that being good feedback.
Great, thanks, Nicole. The next question is from Ed. We've had a number of questions about ADA accessibility. And this question asks, can you speak a little bit about making the stage permanently wheelchair accessible? And what are we doing to make events accessible? So this may be a 2-part question, one for Nicole and also for Eric, who hosts a lot of events at Civic Center Park through the Conservancy's programming.
So concept, I mean, we are working on accessibility through the Greek theater, which you saw in those slides. Concept 2 is definitely has that ramp around the front side, which works for making it everyday accessible. For the events, concept 1 has the ramp. To get to the back of the house to 14th, we are still studying that. We have some ideas to use the alcoves as an area where we could potentially have an elevator or a lift to provide access to the backside, but we really want to push our thinking on that as we get into this next stage of design to how we could make that more accessible on an everyday use. So we're continuing to be challenged, and I'm excited about that, thinking about how we can push some more ideas.
Great, thanks, Nicole. Eric, are you able to add to that as well?
You know, I think, you know, with this particular project, the focus is definitely on design and accessibility and things like that. But I know from a larger perspective, the city's Office of Special Events and through the city support offices in these areas have really been working with event promoters and event producers to work on making sure they're being accommodating in their event production. You know, what as you may know, for events in Civic Center Park, it's a variety of people that are coming coming in and producing the events and things like that, and things like interpreters and ASL interpreters and things like that are ultimately the responsibility of the event producer. But I know the city is doing a good job through the Office of Special Events of educating event producers on their role in that area.
Great, thanks, Eric. The next question is about water. Ed is interested in saving water, and I'm wondering if Mike Bruchard could speak a little bit about how Parks and Rec is considering water for our water features. Oh, Mike, you're muted, or we can't hear you. Uh-oh, we can't hear you, unfortunately.
Yeah, it sounds like it looks like we might be having some issues with Michael's audio. So I don't know if there's someone else that might be able to take it.
Yeah, Happy, would you like to speak to the game plan a little bit in terms of Parks' interest in saving water?
Sure, I'd be glad to, and I'm a poor substitute for Mike Bouchard. I will just start off with that. But you know, when we think about the game plan and our goal, one of our main pillars is every drop. In fact, and it really speaks to a strong desire to continue to make you know, really tremendous progress on saving water. And we do that in a number of ways relating to upgrading our irrigation system throughout the system. In many places, very old system, and putting centralized control and other features that enable us to save water. We have an important partnership with Denver Water in a number of our parks that allow us to take advantage of reuse water and other measures. I know that there's a strong desire to have a water feature in the park, and we know these are very popular in parks all over the city, and so we would be really looking very hard to ensure that we're using the types of strategies and engineering and so on of water features that provide these amenities, but at the same time ensure that we're saving as much water as possible. So it's more expensive, certainly, but using recirculating systems so that water isn't just going down into the drainage is one of the things we would be looking at in terms of the water feature. And if Mike disagrees with me, he'll post it in the chat, or he'll add anything important that I missed.
Great, thanks, Happy. The next question is from Tommy. Tommy would be interested to see how the proposed tree plantings in Bannack Street relates to the existing and originally intended tree canopy for the park. So I'll pass that to Meredith.
Yeah, that's a great question. So in the second concept we saw tonight, actually, it was the placement of those trees near the water feature actually were intended to be kind of the extension of those trees along on kind of either side of the great lawn there. So very intentionally kind of placed. And that's why they pinched a little bit closer in that option. So we have definitely kind of looked at that tree placement with the overall master plan and guidelines to make sure that we've been aligned with that thinking all along.
Great, thanks, Meredith. The next question is about native Colorado landscaping and plants, and how will those types of planting plans be incorporated and promoted within both designs? So I'll let both teams answer this question. Go ahead.
Well, I'll jump in first, and then Nicole, you can. I think, first of all, we're not at the point in the process where we've gone out and selected all the plants, but I think that we've heard a lot about adding color, adding native plants, thinking about being kind of water wise in our plant selection as well. And those are all things that I think will be very much considered and thought through as we get to that next level of design, when we start picking out kind of curating plant lists and plant palettes that way. Nicole or Megan, do you have anything to add?
I know Megan always has a great response for this, but this, the central gathering feature has had great gardens over the years with the annual planting. So how we can start thinking about that to be more local and native plants, and really it's even an opportunity to tell stories too. So I think we're really excited about those garden spaces and what they can be in the central gathering feature. But yes, like Meredith said, we haven't gotten to the design of the specifics of that yet.
Great. The next question is about how do the designs purposefully honor and enhance the City Beautiful movement and the Beaux-Arts history of Civic Center Park? How do these designs incorporate equity and universal people first design? That's a complicated question, but probably a great one for both Meredith and Nicole to answer.
Well, I'll jump in first again, because I think, what really struck me in that question, I'm going to hit on, is the kind of people first component. And I think Bannack obviously is one of the projects that, taking a road and making it kind of people first and people oriented is the entire, one of the key purposes. And so thinking about how we really extend the park into Bannack and make more places for people and think about that daily comfort is huge. The other thing that I saw come up in chat, so I just want to touch on now as we think about kind of equity and accessibility and this idea of kind of curbless streets and everything, there certainly would be, we would think through that ADA piece of the street. And I know that, the tactile warning strips or some sort of buffer treatment between the bike lane and the pedestrian zone for ADA purposes. Absolutely. Those things will be, kind of developed more as we get into more design.
And I can speak to the other areas of the central gathering feature, Promenade and Greek theater, specifically the Greek theater. The answer to that question, I think, is how do we do it? It's very carefully, because those two goals are not always in line with one another. Unfortunately, the City Beautiful vocabulary is very much emphasizes terracing, which is not always an access-friendly strategy. So as we look at the theater, we have a number of opportunities to add ramps where there have historically been stairs. We're really excited about that second stage option, not only because it includes that ramp, but it really takes advantage of the unique Greek theater architecture and the colonnade by bringing the stage outward and doing a stage in the round. It'll be a very different venue for the city. The other piece I think that's going to be key there is just the use of materials that honor that historic vocabulary, and we have a lot of good guidance for that in the master plan guidelines.
Great. I think we have time for just one more question. And I apologize to the city staff. We've got a lot of design questions tonight, which we don't always have, but it's a great time for the design team to answer. So this one I'll pass back to Megan again. If you could please expand on the current challenges of how the Greek theater stage is not working as currently designed.
That is a very good question. And we're balancing not only the needs for performers, but also day-to-day needs. Again, this is first and foremost a public park space. So while we are looking at back of house access, some of these event-only spaces like the alcoves and the small changing rooms in the back of house that are part of the historic architecture, we also first and foremost want to make sure that a kid can get on the stage and take a picture with their class during a field trip, that anyone can get up there and use and hang out on that stage during an event like Civic Center Eats. If you look at the Greek theater, there are a number of terraces that go up and then down, kind of cutting through the structure, making it very difficult right now for us. I will say impossible for us to provide access to back of house without those lifts that you saw in the plans. What we heard from focus groups is that we may need to push harder with the Landscape Preservation Commission to see if there are any possible opportunities to broach the historic architecture and see how we can do that. But again, we are really excited to now have ADA access to the stage itself. That was certainly the #1 priority. But I think we're still working is the answer, unfortunately, on streamlining that back of house route.
Great, thanks, Megan. I think we also want to ask Eric about this question as well, because he hosts a lot of events at the Greek Theater. So Eric, could you chime in as well?
Yeah, certainly. I think from a programming perspective, the stage shape, the stage size right now, the multi-levels of the stage makes it very difficult for a lot of types of performances, as well as the size of the stage to bring a true concert type experience in there. It's just not a big enough stage, and the terrace makes it quite difficult, and the ability not to have places to fly AV equipment and things like that. So that is a big challenge. The materiality, frankly, of the stage as well is not what modern performance, whether they be music, dance, theater, things like that, are used to, and frankly will perform on a lot. And so when programs come in now, almost universally, they will typically bring in a mobile stage and not use what's existing there. And so the hope is that we can avoid that in the future.
Great, thanks, Eric. And with that, I think we'll go ahead and cover next steps. Thank you all for being here with us this evening on a beautiful summer evening. We appreciate your time and your interest in the project. So I'll go ahead and pass it over to Kelly Turner now to walk us through the next steps of the project.
Great, thanks, Jenna. So again, I'll just echo her sentiment. Thank you for spending your Thursday evening up till dinner time or through dinner time with us. And holding through with us through this hour-and-a-half long presentation. We value all of your feedback that you've given so far, and we'll continue to do that throughout this process. So as you know, or as some of you probably know, at least, we reached out back in February for initial thoughts and ideas on what these concepts needed to contain. So that was in Public Workshop 1. Here we are, middle of summer, or spring, I guess, still technically, for concept #2, or Public Workshop #2, where we created these concepts. We're getting your feedback on them, getting preferred alternates, and we'll work on those preferred designs from your feedback here, as well as the online survey. And then we'll reach back out in the fall for Public Workshop #3 with that preferred design for each of these 4 areas of work. And then the design team will finalize their concepts and turn them in so that we can start working on formal design service contracts. So this will get us through concept here this year. And then on some of the areas, we already have funding to be able to start design next year in 2022. So for the last slide, if you have any questions or want to provide additional feedback, please contact Jenna Harris at her email link right there. Share your thoughts on the survey, which you can find the link to through the denvergov.org/the-outdoor-downtown. The survey is on there, and that link should have been provided also in your invitation for this public workshop. Again, attend workshop #3 this coming fall, where we will fine-tune these concepts, narrow it down to 1, and present that concept for each of these areas of work. So thank you again so much for spending your time. We want this continued feedback. We appreciate your thoughts, and have a good rest of your evening. And the survey should go live after this presentation, so you can jump right into that after this. So thank you again, and have a good evening.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thanks, everyone.